Hey everyone, welcome back to another week of the Triple Play. This is Danielle, and today I am with Isaac and Emily. Let's just go ahead and dive right in. Homecoming week has come and gone. The Vols beat North Texas 24-0, and the Vols are now bowl eligible, standing at 6-4 overall on the season. Going into this game, I'm going to go ahead and note this because we're going to talk about it a little bit later. The Vols were a 41.5 point favorite going into the game, and they only won by 24. Granted, it was a shutout. We'll talk more about that in a second, but let's go ahead and look at some stats. Alvin Kamara and Jalen Hurd, it was all about thunder and lightning in this game. I think you could definitely say that that's where Tennessee pretty much thrived off of, what Tennessee thrived off of during this game besides the defensive standpoints. That's another thing we'll look at in a second. But Kamara had 15 carries for 127 yards with 2 touchdowns, while Jalen Hurd had 15 carries for 72 yards and a touchdown. And Josh Dobbs just did not look all that great in this game, which is not what you'd expect because, like I said, Tennessee was a 41.5 point favorite going into this. But Dobbs was 15 for 23 with 136 yards and an interception and no touchdowns thrown. But UT's defense, like I mentioned, they had a really good showing. They allowed just 199 total yards, which is the fewest yards allowed since the Vols, or for the Vols defense, since they gave up 142 yards against UT Martin in a 50-0 shutout in 2010. That was a really good game. I remember watching that. But this was also the first shutout by the Vols since 2011, I want to say. That whenever they beat, who did they beat in that game? It was MTSU. 24-0, I believe it was, or 27-0, I think. That was also a homecoming game. But the fact that the defense showed up in this game, that's really good. I think that's something that the Vols have been looking for. And like I said, the rushing game was really good. But the Vols were favored by 41.5 points, and North Texas defense has allowed 45.6 points per game this season. So the question that comes about with all of this, with the underscoring and everything, do you look at this game as an underperformance from the Vols, or were they just kind of like taking it easy, knowing that this was just North Texas? Because it kind of can go both ways.
Yeah, I see both sides of that. I think the fact that it was a noon game kind of contributes to that, too. That was the first noon game we played all year. And for the freshmen, I mean, like, our team has so many freshmen. So for them, I feel like, because we've had so much hype all year, that, like, you know, we've played so many night games, and that's a much better environment. So for this game, it was homecoming, it was North Texas, and they're one of the worst teams. And just because it was at noon, I feel like they weren't really, like, excited. They didn't. It almost looked like they didn't want to play.
That's
I think
true.
Maybe they were more focused on next week, which is a dangerous thing to do, and that's how a lot of upsets happen. But thankfully, you know, our defense played great. Our offense was a little shaky, and just they didn't look like they have in previous games. So maybe it is a combination of an underperformance because they didn't want to be there, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it's just them coming down from 2 physical weekends before this one. They had Alabama, where they were in it all the way till the end. And then they had South Carolina, which at the same time they were in it till the very end, and they luckily got out of there with the win. I think this is just really an accumulation of both those games and maybe just trying to recover with the last stretch of Missouri and Vanderbilt, who are both much better teams than North Texas, and they're definitely going to need their rest for those games and going into the bowl holiday break.
Which is another important thing to know is we're bowl eligible now, which is a relief to come in, that we don't have to wait for the last game and hope and pray that maybe we'll make a bowl this year.
Right.
So it's nice to kind of have that, and I feel like as a fan I can kind of relax a little bit. I mean, I hope we win out, but just to know that, hey, we're going to make a bowl no matter what, it's a nice feeling.
I expect us to win out. Of course, Missouri's, you know, they got the quarterback issues with Matty Mock now suspended, and Gary Pinkel, he announced his retirement today. But so they're definitely have a lot more inspiration to try and beat us and win out themselves. I expect us to win that game. I expect us to beat Vanderbilt too. But I expect us to win a lot of games that we end up coming up short on. So if we play like we played against North Texas, we won't win out. We will probably lose to Missouri for a fourth straight year next weekend. But if we if what they're doing, if what I believe they were doing by resting and getting their rest and their strength back, I think we'll be just fine for the next 2 weekends.
I agree with that, and I think with Missouri, we play them this weekend. Going to Missouri, that's going to be at 7:15 on ESPN2 this Saturday. But I think with them just coming off of the close win against BYU like they did, and with everything happening with Coach Pinkel, with his resignation at the end of the year due to his cancer diagnosis, which is really sad, and we want to extend just best wishes to his family, and hopefully he'll get a clean bill of health as soon as possible. But it does bring a new flame to this Missouri team, I think. And it's already scary enough playing at Mizzou. That's an intense place to be at during the game.
Especially right now.
Exactly.
With everything else that's going on. So
right.
It's just going to be, there's a lot of interesting storylines going on down there. So there's just, I feel like it's going to be a very tense environment. So whatever Missouri's team brings to that, whatever our team brings to that, it's just kind of up in the air. And I think, like you said, if we play like we did this weekend, I do not think we'll win, which just makes me angry because I really want to see us beat Missouri.
Right.
But I feel like if we played against, like we played against Bama, I think we'll have a great game. I think we can beat them, and it just kind of depends on. I think it just depends on how Missouri's going to react to everything that's happened recently. So
that's true.
I mean, you touched on the Bama game and how well we played in that game. I think if we played that well in every game, we would easily be undefeated or
maybe
have one loss to
yeah.
Alabama. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, Alabama, the way things are looking, is looking like one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't turn the ball over 5 times, it would be undefeated. So I think if we can play that well against a team of that caliber and we played like that for every game, we'll win out. We'll win our bowl, no problem.
And I think it always comes down to, it's a mental thing. You know, we went into the Bama game, and you know it's Bama, so you have to play your heart out. You know you have to play you have to make every single second count if you want to come out with a win. And so maybe that, kind of going back to the North Texas thing, maybe they were just kind of like, oh, it's North Texas. We don't have to give our all. I mean, maybe they didn't consciously think that, but you know that it's somewhere in the back of their head, like, I'm playing North Texas. This is not Alabama. So maybe if we go into the Mizzou game with that attitude that, hey, like, we have to play our best, we have to give our all for this game, then maybe we'll come out and be victorious for the first time.
And I think it's also important for Mizzou that the fact that they're sitting on a 500 season right now, they're 5-5. They're looking to win out just as much as the Vols are, but I think Mizzou has a lot more riding on them winning out, just with everything that's happening, with whether it's within the team, anything going on at the university, like News has been saying. But it's just, there's so many things riding on this game for both teams, but I feel like there's more riding on it for Mizzou right now. Since Tennessee's already bowl eligible, it's like, okay, we have that under our belts. That's good. But it's definitely going to be interesting. And like I said, that's going to be this Saturday at 7:15 on ESPN2. And so going into the SEC really quick, some pretty big games happened this weekend. We're going to focus on 2 big ones for the SEC, but Arkansas beat number 9 LSU 31-14. That's the second straight loss for the Bayou Bengals, and it's also the second straight game with just double-digit rushing yards for Leonard Fournette. He had 91 yards on 19 carries with just 1 touchdown, which was eerily similar to last week whenever he had 19 carries for just 31 yards with a touchdown. But one thing that's really crazy to note is Alex Collins for Arkansas. He had 16 carries for 141 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's probably one of the better performances I've seen from him all season. But this is kind of like a discussion point on which is more important. I mean, we all pretty much agree with it. We've already agreed upon it before the show, but Arkansas is on a 4-game win streak right now, and the past 2 wins have been upsets of top 20 teams. And then LSU has just lost 2 in a row, 2 ranked teams as well. So it's just kind of crazy to think about. I'm sorry, Arkansas is not ranked, they're not ranked. I don't know what I'm saying. But it's just, they should be. That's another thing that we could bring up. They're on the border of being where they should be ranked, but definitely still underperforming in some ways.
Exactly.
But the fact of which is more important between LSU losing 2 and then Arkansas winning 4 straight with 2 upsets back-to-back like this, which is more important, it's definitely looking like Arkansas, like we said before.
I mean, you go down to Death Valley, it was a night game, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
By the end of it, it was nighttime.
Yeah.
And if you're going to beat LSU by how many touchdowns? 2? 3 touchdowns in Death Valley, that's definitely a statement win for their program. And to hold Fournette under 100 yards, I mean, Alabama held him to 35 yards, and I mean, you'd expect that from Alabama. For Arkansas to do that, that's a pretty big thing to do. Yeah. So this is big for Arkansas to have won the last 4 straight, and the last 2 being ranked upsets. I don't even think they should be ranked because they still are 6-4 and only 4-2 in the SEC.
That's true.
But they're looking much better than they were earlier in the season.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning of the season, a lot of people were really, really angry with Brett Bielema because of the Toledo loss. That was really the first thing everybody was kind of like, what? But now they've come back and beat. At the beginning of the season, people were saying LSU is going to be in the playoff. And now a team who lost to Toledo at the beginning of the season has now beat LSU and Ole Miss, who it's just been a crazy year in football, but it's just I think Brett Bielema has definitely moved himself off of the hot seat after these two.
Completely. Last 4, but
yeah,
really
the last
2.
four, and especially the Tennessee win, really, which, I mean, that hurt us, but them winning their first SEC road game, that really, I think that was the first thing that kind of made Arkansas fans kind of calm down a little bit, and now with the past 4 wins, they're really, really, like...
settling in.
Yeah, they're settling in. I think they're kind of... Brett Bielema has a little bit more wiggle room now.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. And I think also that Tennessee win the Arkansas win against Tennessee, I think that was really a vocal point for the Arkansas team. That's the win they were looking for, especially for Bielema's standpoint. That really kind of got the target off of his back a little bit. It was a statement win that he was looking for and that team was looking for too, but you can't help but be impressed by this Arkansas team. I mean, yes, they are 6-4, 4-2 in the SEC, but this could be interesting. This could be an interesting team to watch for the rest of the season. So we'll see what happens there. But bringing up Leonard Fournette, last week, he obviously, like we said, he had 35 rushing yards, and this week he was at double digits again. And so he was knocked out of first place in the Heisman running by Derrick Henry, who, I mean, you could say now he's easily the best running back in the SEC and probably in college football in general. We've been saying that about Fournette for weeks, but Fournette, he just had kind of... there was a beauty to his run game. I could find a different word for it, but his run game was beautiful. And it still can be, but he's just being stopped by defenses like crazy because they now see the breaks that he was making. It's really obvious. But what's crazy with all of this, Derrick Henry moving up like he has, going into the season, I would look at him and I'm like, okay, I don't really see him as being like a top tier running back just yet. I mean, he's good, but I'm like, I don't see him being one of the tops for this season. I kept looking at Fournette. So... with Derrick Henry kind of leading the way, he is looking like he's going to win the Heisman. And I think it could stand like that for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think the Heisman race is really thinned down now. Derrick Henry's definitely in the front spot. Yeah. And Fournette's still there. He's got, his season rushing yard stats.
Yeah.
But the last 2 games have really killed his standing. There's been a lot of talk of Iowa's quarterback possibly being in the conversation. I don't think so.
I don't agree with that.
There's been a lot of rumors going around that he should be shooting up, but as far as Iowa's concerned, I don't think they're undefeated, but golly, I don't think they played anybody.
They've played 2 ranked teams the whole season.
Oh, yeah, and I don't think any of those teams are ranked now.
No.
Wisconsin, Northwestern, I think both those teams have 4 losses now. So I don't think he's there to be there. And Boykin, with TCU losing a game, everyone's saying he's kind of out of it, which I think is a shame because I think he's a heck of an athlete. But I think it's really down to Derrick Henry, Fournette, and Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, Elliott's really coming up.
He's still being consistent. Ohio State hasn't had any premier wins, but by the end of the season, they're going to have played Michigan State and Michigan.
Right.
So if he has big games in those games, this whole race could change dramatically. But I think this is definitely the year of the running back as far as the Heisman is concerned.
Yeah, I agree with that. And speaking of Derrick Henry, we'll go ahead and look at Alabama's win against Mississippi State, 31-6. And Henry, I mean, he had a really good game, 22 carries, 204 yards with 2 touchdowns. But Dak Prescott, I'm really, really, really surprised by his outing. He had 300 yards, 22 completions out of 43 attempts. He had an interception. He was sacked 9 times, which is a season high for Alabama's defense. I don't think I've ever seen Dak Prescott go down that many times, and that terrifies me. Going into this, he's like he was one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. 9 times he was on the ground. I shouldn't laugh about it, but I'm completely shocked.
I mean, it was like it was a combination of him holding the ball for too long. And that's also, his receivers couldn't get open, but then the offensive line just fell apart on him. It felt like every single play he had no protection. And then, it's one thing, Alabama's defense was just really, really, really good, which they always are. But, I mean, that just kind of, they just tore him apart. Yeah. And it was just like, by the end of that game, he was hurting. And that sucks to see that happen. But, I think a lot of, a lot of people will talk about how good he was before this, but this game just kind of showed, most of the time, a really, really good quarterback, they can scramble around, they can get the ball off, they'll be okay. But 9 sacks, that's just...
And it's sad for the... Bulldogs offensive line, too, because this is one of the better ones that I've looked. I mean, size-wise, they could get a little bit bigger, but they knew how to cover the holes, which was great. But in this game, it was, if you let defenders through 9 times, that's just, it's bad. It's so bad.
Alabama's that dominant, or Mississippi State's fallen that low as far as rushing goes. Prescott, he's a great quarterback, but this is not the same Mississippi State team that we saw last year.
Absolutely
They lost a lot of talent. And you can have your star player at quarterback, and of course it's a very important position. But if you don't have the receivers or the offensive line to back it up, or a rushing game that's going to balance out the offense, it's not really going to work out well for them. And Alabama's defense, the best defense in the country, hands down. It showed today or Saturday especially. You gotta to have a balance on offense, and I think Alabama right now is hit on all cylinders. And what's the hardest game for them left? The Iron Bowl. I mean, they're gonna win out, go to the SEC championship game, play a Florida team who doesn't really have a proven quarterback in Trayon Harris, and I mean they're locked for the playoff, and they're looking so good. I can't think of anyone that can beat them. Maybe Ohio State, but I don't think Clemson or Notre Dame or any other teams that are in the playoff talk right now can beat them.
I sure would love to see Clemson beat them.
It's just this Alabama team. I mean, right now they're obviously the best team in the SEC. I would put them above Clemson, but that's just me in my opinion. I just don't feel like Clemson's that number one team. I feel like Alabama should definitely get the number one spot, but anything could happen with the college football rankings coming out tomorrow. We're gonna go ahead and transition. Or actually, before we transition into talking about the rankings, let me go through with the rest of the SEC scores from this weekend. Florida beat South Carolina 24-14. Georgia beat Auburn 20-13. Kentucky lost to Vanderbilt 21-17. A lot of people are looking at that as a surprise, but Vanderbilt's defense is much better this season, and Patrick Tolles and the Kentucky offense have just been struggling as of late. Texas A&M beat Western Carolina 41-17, and then like we said, Mizzou beat BYU 20-16. But in the AP rankings, which came out yesterday on Sunday afternoon, there were 4 SEC teams in those rankings: Alabama at number 3, Florida at number 8, LSU at number 17, and Ole Miss at number 25. And so the college football rankings will come out tomorrow, but the projected top 4 as of right now, based off of the AP rankings, you have Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, and Oklahoma State. So, I mean, seeing Oklahoma State move up, that's pretty surprising. But what's more surprising, in my opinion, is 5 and 6. You have Notre Dame and Iowa. Iowa's at number 6, and I get that they're undefeated. They've played 2 ranked teams. And it's just, I don't think they're worth that number 6 spot right now. I don't think that at all.
The last team to beat Iowa was Tennessee. Let's just throw that out there. And if you think back to the Tax Slayer Bowl and the team that we played, that is not even a top 25 team. And I get a lot of things change, but like you said, they've played 2 ranked teams. Right. And a lot of the times, strength of schedule doesn't play as much as it should in the rankings.
That's right.
But, a lot of people said last year, Ohio State doesn't play any teams there. But then they won the national championship. Yeah. So it's just kind of maybe sometimes these teams who don't really play the best teams and they come up and they go into the playoff and they can still win. But if Iowa somehow, if they win out, make it in the playoff, I don't see them winning. I don't see that happening. I don't see them making it into the playoff. I think they're going to be tested. So.
I also think in that same breath, though, bringing up Ohio State, I mean, a lot of people say they don't play that big of teams, but you have to look at whenever they played Alabama, they're playing against an Alabama team who has played a wide variety of teams. Good opponents that are ranked, and then ones that may not be ranked. But then you have a team like Ohio State who doesn't play as many people, so they have their good players still in. Nobody's really injured. So you're playing against a team that could be hurt, or just they're having trouble with play calls and everything. And I feel like that same thing could happen this time around. That's why Iowa's doing so well. I mean, like we've mentioned numerous times, they're playing only 2 ranked teams, and going through the rest of the season, I don't think they're going to be playing anybody that's ranked. So it's just... Well,
the best team they play that's left on our schedule, Minnesota. I mean, they beat Minnesota by 5 points. Yeah. Minnesota's supposed to be a lot better than they have been with Gary Kill retiring. Yeah. And then they're going to play Purdue, and they're going to go to Nebraska. Nebraska's a lot better team than the record says. I mean, Nebraska's had like the worst luck team in the country. Yeah. They've lost all sorts of games by like 2 or 3 points. And they did beat Michigan State, so I can see that being a sleeper upset for Nebraska there. But if I was to win out, they're going to make it to the Big Ten championship, and they're going to play Ohio State or Michigan State. Right. And I don't think anyone expects Iowa to come out of that game. Yeah, come out of that game with it even being close. So they're going to be in the conversation till the very end if they win out. But I don't think they deserve to be in the playoff whatsoever.
And I think also it's important to note the fact that Baylor has fallen out of contention. They got their first loss this weekend to Oklahoma. We're getting ready to talk about that. But I'm going to throw this out there, and this is probably a stretch, but Baylor did, with the loss, they were at number 4. They dropped down to number 10. We could potentially see them, if they went out, move back up a little bit more. Maybe not back into the top 6, or top 4 definitely, but maybe top 6, but they could move back up to like 7 or 8 maybe. But we're going to go ahead and talk about Baylor real quick. Baylor was handed their first loss by Oklahoma, 44-34. And Baker Mayfield for Oklahoma, going back to the Heisman talks, he could be making a push for the Heisman. He's still not going to be in the top 5, but he could be somewhere in the top 10, we'll say, depending on how he does with the rest of the season. But he had a pretty good game this weekend. He was 24 for 34, 270 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. But looking at the numbers with the rankings, Baylor went from number 4 to number 10, like I said, and Oklahoma went from 12 to 7. So, I mean, this is an Oklahoma team who at the beginning of the season, they were looking really good. Tennessee played them. Tennessee almost beat them, but of course they got the win. But it kind of just makes me wonder if there could be something that happens with this college football playoff ranking that comes out tomorrow. If for some reason, instead of Iowa being in that number 6 spot, Oklahoma could be there. Because, I mean, the AP and the CFP doesn't have to match up all the time. But who knows?
Well, I mean, to talk about Oklahoma, that's really interesting because you have Oklahoma State who's in the number 4 spot, and they're going to play. So if Oklahoma wins that game and they win out, might be that would be a valid point to say they could be there.
Right. But I think that loss to Texas really, really hurts them.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you look at the rest of Texas' season, that is, I don't know what's going on down there. Charlie Strong is struggling a little bit, but I mean that's the only really big win he's had.
Right.
And so I think that loss to Texas is really going to hurt them, and I think that you could make an argument that if we're talking about the playoff, that I would say if they win out, I don't know, that's a tricky thing because if they beat Oklahoma State, then yes, that is a big win.
Right.
But Baylor and Oklahoma State, that's going to be a very telling game next week too. So however that goes. So let's say Oklahoma State wins and then Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, then yes, I could see them coming back. But even, let's say Oklahoma State, I don't know. I just don't see Oklahoma making it into the playoff.
The Big 12 is such a mess right now. Oklahoma lost to Texas. And to say they're going to be the playoff, but then say TCU's not going to be, and their only loss was to Oklahoma State, a team that's in the playoff right now.
Yeah.
I don't think that's fair to TCU. And then you got Baylor who just lost to Oklahoma. But as far as the best loss for these teams, out of the 3 of those, I would say TCU. They lost.
I agree with that.
And if Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, I don't see why TCU's not getting an argument that they could be moved back up. I mean, right now, before the rankings are coming out tomorrow, TCU's 15th in the country.
Right.
And they beat Kansas. Of course, Kansas is 0-10 now.
Yeah. But
they beat Kansas by 6, so that's definitely underperformance. But still, I think all these one-loss teams in the Big 12, if any of them's going to make it, I think TCU deserves to be there because they have the best loss of any 3 of them.
And they're always a contention team, too.
Exactly.
Like, even before, like, the college football playoffs start, I mean, TCU's always a team where you're going to see them in the higher bowl games, if not a championship game. So, I mean, TCU, they do have the best loss, but the Big 12 is just, I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
The Big 12 and the Pac-12 both are really, everyone was talking about all these great teams out of the conferences, and I think both of them might, if Oklahoma State wins out, of course, the Big 12 won't miss out, but it's looking like there's a chance that both conferences could miss out.
Definitely the Pac-12. I don't see any Pac-12 teams making a run. I don't think it's possible. The only one would be Stanford, but they have 2 losses, so unless something crazy happens and all the teams that are in the top 10 right now lose their next 2 games, I don't see Stanford even getting in.
No.
So, and like you said, the Pac-12 was really hyped up before the season. You know, it looked like they were going to be, you didn't know maybe what was going to happen, but they have definitely underperformed this year.
It reminds me a lot of the SEC, how they just kind of cannibalized each other. I mean, you had USC come in, Oregon came in, all these UCLA, all these top 10 ranked teams at the beginning of the year. And now, Oregon's got 3 losses, USC's got 3 losses, Stanford's got a second loss, and Utah, a team that was ranked 3rd at one point, got second loss against Arizona. And, Arizona's a good team, and they've lost 5 games, but still, just so much competition out there. It's just been killing the conference.
Yeah.
And, every team's trying to win, but in the national spotlight, it's just been killing the conference.
Yeah.
And that goes back to strength of schedule as well, because, with the Pac-12, it's a tough conference. The SEC is the toughest conference, but like you said, we cannibalize each other. But then, so it's kind of hard to make this argument. Well, what about a one-loss team in the SEC compared to an undefeated team in the Big 10 or the Big 12? It's just kind of like, how do you really rank which team deserves to be there? So, that's just, you have to leave that to the experts and the playoff committee. But
that's true.
I don't know. It's just the strength of schedule is really something that bothers me sometimes because.
Sorry.
No, it's just like, I mean, think about Alabama and all the teams that they play, and then think, like we said, Iowa with their two ranked teams that they've played.
Mm-hmm.
Well, looking at Iowa, they're fifth in the playoff projections right now, and they're undefeated and all that. And they haven't played much good teams. But I mean, you look at the Pac-12, you look at the Big 12. I mean, there's teams like TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State. I think any of those teams could beat Iowa. In the Pac-12, I think Stanford, Utah, even USC or Oregon. I think those teams, and maybe even UCLA, could beat Iowa. And it's such a shame that like these teams in the Big Ten are not playing anybody, and they're just all this national attention. And Ohio State, of course, they are a good team, but still, who knows? I mean, who really knows?
It's all really up in the air right now. And I mean, with the season winding down like it is, people are thinking that it's going to be finalized soon, but a lot of shakeups can happen, and we're seeing it with Baylor losing. So, I mean, I don't know, but another game to look at, we've already talked about Oregon and Stanford, but Oregon upset Stanford this week. Stanford was number 7. And Oregon wins it 38-36. And Stanford could have tied it up at the very end of the game with 10 seconds left, but it was a failed 2-point conversion, which is really surprising from the Stanford team. But again, it's kind of something people have seen coming for a while. But Kevin Hogan for Stanford, he was 28 for 37 with 304 yards, 2 touchdowns and interception. And Christian McCaffrey for Stanford as well. He had a really strong game, 33 carries, 147 yards with a touchdown. But with this loss, Stanford is now out of the playoff contention talks since they're at number 15, like we've said. And Oregon is now at number 23. And what's interesting with this is that Oregon hasn't been in the rankings since week 4, whenever they were number 13. And they lost to Utah 62-20, which still is mind-blowing. That was an incredible loss for Oregon. But like we've already said, a lot of things are still up in the air with the college football playoffs, and even with the season winding down like it is. There's only, I mean, most teams have 2 games left. Some teams have 3 games left. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how it ends up, and it'll be really interesting looking at the college football playoff rankings that come out tomorrow evening. So other college football games that happened this weekend: Clemson beat Syracuse 37-27. Ohio State beat Illinois 28-3. Notre Dame beat Wake Forest 28-7. Iowa beat Minnesota 40-35. Oklahoma State beat Iowa State 35-31. That was a lot closer than I was expecting. I really thought Oklahoma State would take charge in that game. Arizona they upset Utah, 37-30. That was really surprising in overtime too. So commend Arizona for that. And then we also have Michigan State beating Maryland 24-7. Michigan beating Indiana 48-41. Also an overtime win there. Michigan's just, I guess they love overtime. They must love overtime. Yeah, that was really interesting. TCU beat Kansas 23-17. Florida State beat North Carolina State 34-17. Northwestern beat Purdue 21-14. Washington State upset UCLA 31-27. And that's a game I feel like a lot of people have been waiting to see a win come for Washington State, I should say. They've been looking for that win, and it was really good that they got that against UCLA. Washington State is now 7-3 on the season, so they're slowly moving back up. Navy beat SMU 55-14. Houston beat Memphis 35-34. That's really interesting. That was a really exciting game to be looking at going into this weekend. So Houston is still undefeated. They are now 10-0 on the season. South Florida upset Temple 44-23, and North Carolina beat Miami 59-21. And so going over to the NFL, we'll just go ahead and talk about the sad news first and get it out of the way, because I know a lot of people are just not wanting to talk about it, me being one of them, because my heart breaks for Peyton Manning. But let's go ahead and just start off with the Broncos losing to the Chiefs 29-13. And there's good news and bad news for Peyton, but we're going to go ahead and cover the good news first. The good news is that he is now the holder of the record for the most passing yards in NFL history with 71,871 career passing yards. But the bad news, there's now 3 pieces of bad news. I just had 2 coming into the show, but then I got a piece of third bad news right before the show started. But he was benched late in the third quarter with the worst outing of his career. He was 5 for 20, 35 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And I'm pretty sure that brings his grand total of the season up to 17, last I counted. So that's really sad. So that's bad news piece number 1. Bad news piece number 2. It's been obvious that he's been hurting all season. He's just between his shoulders, his back, his arm at times, but his foot now is the big problem. He has a partially torn plantar fascia. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And that's in his right foot. And so that leads to my third piece of bad news. He has been ruled out for Sunday's game against the Chicago Bears. So he will not be starting, and that's going to be very interesting, I think, for the Broncos. But I saw that he mentioned in a press conference that, like, he knows he's been hurting, and it ended up, like, him just wanting to get out there because he thought he was feeling good, but he thought maybe it was just me kind of going against, maybe it was just like my heart saying I was fine, but my brain's just like, maybe not. But he realized that he hurt the team by going out there and playing. So it's just going to be, it's interesting seeing this happen at this point in the season too, because now I feel like this injury and the fact that he's being ruled out after his worst game of his career, it's bringing up the talks once again of, is this kind of going to be the downfall of Peyton? And I mean, when your foot's injured as a quarterback, that's a pretty important injury.
Right. I think this is the end of the road for him. I think that this will be his final year, and it was nice to see him get the record. I think that's why he came back, was he wanted to get that record. He was really close to it, and I mean, it was nice seeing that, and he's had a wonderful career, but I think this is definitely going to be the last season for him, and I think his health and his age has really caught up with him.
I just don't think, my dad talks about this all the time, that he just doesn't have the arm strength that he used to, and it's just, and you could definitely tell that he was hurt last night. I mean, it was just like,
it was hard to watch.
It was hard to watch, and like, you know, I was really sad that he didn't get the record against the Colts, because that was just, he threw that interception right at the end, and I was just like, no, Peyton, like, this is the worst possible time, and he's just 30 yards away from it. So, and that was their first loss on the season, which hurt even more.
I think it's interesting, though, that Brock Osweiler is going to be getting looks like he is now. I mean, whenever he went into the game, granted it was towards the end of the third quarter, he had an okay performance. He was 14 for 24 with 146 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. So, it's tough to say that the Broncos are going to be in good hands come Sunday against the Bears, but, I mean, maybe this guy could at least kind of keep it consistent for the Broncos, but it's tough not seeing Peyton.
Yeah, he's not
really tough.
But I just want to point out that his one interception was to Eric Berry.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
That's always nice. It's hard to watch the Chiefs and the Broncos play because it's just like, oh, here are my two favorite balls. Like,
yeah.
And you want both of them to do good, but it's kind of impossible for both of them to have great games and one team to win. So
That's true.
That's a tough game to watch for me, and but it was good to see Barry get an interception that was not from Peyton. So
right.
That was nice, but I don't know. It's just,
I feel like that kind of makes it easier.
Yeah.
Knowing that there was an interception, that it was for Barry. Yeah, but that it wasn't against Peyton. So that's a little bit easier to handle. But for the Titans, another loss is not easy to handle. They lost to the Panthers, who are now still undefeated, 27-10. The Titans are now 2-7 on the season. They are 0-5 at home. But Mariota had a quiet day. He threw for 185 yards with one interception. And Dexter McCluster, it's really interesting how this happens. He has 3 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown. His longest run was 25 yards, and that was on the touchdown. So, I mean, it's a really interesting stat line. I had to sit here and do some math and like, wait, it's just weird. But, I mean, hey, good for him to be scoring a touchdown like that. And he's from the SEC. I want to say he played at Ole Miss.
He played at Ole Miss. He actually tore Tennessee up when he was at Ole Miss.
Ugh, how can we forget?
Went down to Oxford and he ran all over us in that Wildcat.
But the Panthers are still undefeated, like I said. And, I mean, going into this, you expected them to be the better team. They looked really good. But there are 3 undefeated teams in the NFL right now, the Patriots, the Panthers, and the Bengals. But the Bengals are still just 8-0, while the other 2 are 9-0. And the Bengals have the Monday night game tonight at 8:30 on ESPN as they host the Houston Texans. And that should be really interesting. Houston's 3-5 on the season. And right now, Cincinnati's favored by 10.5 points. So who knows what will happen there tonight in that Monday Night Football matchup. But looking at other scores, the Bills beat the Jets 22-17. Lions beat the Packers 18-16. That was really interesting. That was I think the Lions had a 24-game road skid against the Packers. The last time they won was like 1991 or something like that.
Yeah, it was a 24-game road skid against the Packers, and I came across something that was pretty surprising. There's been 4 U.S. presidents that have been in the office since the Lions last beat the Packers. So it's been a long time. It was good. It had my heart racing until the very end with the onside kick recovery and the missed field goal from Crosby, which you don't see that every day.
Not at all.
It was a great game. Really good to see the Lions pull out. But I think the more interesting point on that game is the Packers started out 6-0, and now they've dropped 3 straight. So it's really wondering what's going on up there in Wisconsin with them.
A lot of people are saying it's because in a commercial Mike Ditka put on a Packers vest, and I mean he was a coach for the Bears, and since he put on that vest, like whenever that first aired, the Packers are 0-3, so they're like, is it the Ditka curse? Like, is something happening there? So who knows? Maybe everybody could thank Mike Ditka for this happening, but who knows? I found that this morning. I'm like, that's really insane. So Coach Ditka, if you're like some kind of, I don't know, a wizard or something with this, with your vest, that could be, that I would not be surprised either. He's ridiculous. He's great. The Buccaneers beat the Cowboys 10-6. The Bears beat the Rams 37-13. Redskins beat the Saints 47-14. Dolphins beat the Eagles 20-19. That was ridiculous. That's a crazy 1-point win. Steelers beat the Browns 30-9, and there's going to be some injury problems happening with the Steelers after this, and they've been injury prone all season. But Ben Roethlisberger came back in and replaced Landry Jones, who was injured. But if Ben wouldn't have been able to come back because he's been injured the past couple of weeks, if he couldn't have come back and Vic is still out, they would have had to put Heath Miller in at quarterback from what I've heard. I haven't checked the sources as to see if that was actually correct or not. That's just what I've been hearing, and for the betterment of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I hope that's not true. The Jaguars beat the Ravens 22-20. Vikings beat the Raiders 30-14. Patriots beat the Giants 27-26 with Steven Gostkowski pretty much winning it at the last second for the Patriots. I really thought the Giants were going to give them their first loss. And then the Chiefs, like we said, they beat the Broncos 29-13, and the Seahawks lost to the Cardinals 39-32, which is really, I mean, I don't want to say it's surprising. The Cardinals are looking really good this season. I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there that we could potentially see them going far in the playoffs. I won't go in depth on that, but... Well,
last year, everyone was thinking the same thing. They were in the same position they are now, 7-2. And then Carson Palmer went down with the torn ACL.
Yeah.
If he can stay healthy, I could see this team going all the way to at least the NFC Championship.
I agree with that.
And if you can beat Seattle, and the game was it in Arizona or was it in Seattle?
I want to say it was in Arizona.
Seattle?
Yeah,
it was in Seattle.
No, it was in Seattle. Yeah.
To win in Seattle, period. Is hard, so.
But the Seattle team's also 4-5, so but that puts them at 2-2 at home.
That's the biggest surprise on the year for me in the NFL is that they're 4-5.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people. I mean, the Seahawks have kind of dominated the past few years, obviously, and I think a lot of people before this season were kind of expecting them to, come back and have another great year, but they're just kind of looking a little. They don't look like the Seahawks of last year, the years before.
And Russell Wilson's definitely not the same quarterback, which is just
sad.
It's heartbreaking because he's a quality quarterback. But looking over at UT Hoops real quick, we'll mention some quick scores since it still is the beginning of the season. But the men won the first game of the Rick Barnes era, the first regular season game of the Rick Barnes era, I should say, on Friday night against UNC Asheville, 82-78. And the next game for the men Vols will be tonight, Monday night, at Georgia Tech. That game is at 7 p.m. on ESPNU, and then the Lady Vols dominated. I tried to find a different adjective, but that's all you can really say about this game. Against Central Arkansas for their regular season opener, Lady Vols won it 102-47, and they will be hosting Penn State this Wednesday night at 8 o'clock on SEC Network. So if you can't make it out to Thompson Bowling, definitely tune in because I think that should be an interesting game for the Lady Vols. They should be looking really good this season. I mean, based off of the Central Arkansas game, yeah, they're definitely going to be looking good, but that's also Central Arkansas. So you have to keep that in mind. But that is all that we have for the show this week. Really packed, especially with the NFL and the college football winding down like it is. But soon we will just be talking about basketball, which is really sad to think about that it's just going to be basketball and no more football. And also the semester is going to be winding up very, very soon. So we will be taking a Christmas break. That's what it's going to be called. Coming up really soon while we transition over to the spring semester. But thank you for joining us this week, and we will see you next week.